wait for the okay.
No, I think it's got a problem. Never mind. We can start.
Well, welcome everybody to our congregation gathered here and to the people who are listening in to the service from far away in some cases. We're going to begin with our usual call to worship. Kia noho a iho a kia koto. God be with you. And now we're going to light the candle to remind us of the light of God's love and the warmth of God's welcome and the mystery deeper than any words we can speak. So together we say, welcome to our place, welcome to worship, welcome in the name of our living God. Amen. Now, women have been much in the news recently from the Black Lives Matter movement, which has swept all the way from America to reach New Zealand, certainly, to the latest political uproar over women's rights to abortion. But centuries before these events, two women found a place in the Christian records of Jesus' friends and disciples. And in today's service, we're going to focus on them. They were named Martha and Mary. So let's all read together the story in which they figure. It is found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. Now, in the course of their journey towards Jerusalem, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. But she had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. Martha was upset by all the work she had to do on her own. So she came and said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself?" Now that's a passage that's attracted a lot of attention. And our New Zealand poet Joy Cowley has reimagined this encounter as the conflicted, busy life of an ordinary modern woman. So we're now going to have that read for us by Barbara. Thanks, Barbara.
She knows them well, these sisters of faith. They are a part of her daily routine, and mostly they share her existence. But this morning, the Martha in her is busy, buttering bread for school lunches, cooking porridge, making a shopping list, moving the dog away from the cat's food. She hasn't yet had a chance to comb her hair, and the rest of the day will be just as heavy. So when the Mary in her suggests that she sit at the feet of the Lord a while, she says, "Not now, I don't have the time." But outside the back door, she sees a perfect yellow rose hanging over the fence. Its beauty stops her, and she says to herself, "Through him all things were made." And the words are all that is needed to open the door of her heart. The Mary in her takes her by the hand and leads her into the stillness where her Lord is waiting for her. Again, she remembers the truth of service. Mary and Martha cannot be separated. One takes in and the other gives out, in a natural rhythm, like breathing. She doesn't know how long she stays in the fragrance of his presence, but afterwards, her heavy day seems as light as a feather.
Thank you, Barbara. And now we're going to try and enter into the experience of these two women. And I thought we might do the first one by just reading and saying aloud together a very Mary kind of hymn written for us by Shirley Murray. So let's join in together. Simply to be in stillness, simply to trust that God is here, simply to know the holy presence is to be blessed. So am I blessed. Simply to hold the given moment, simply to lay concern aside, simply to let the heart be speaking is to be blessed. So am I blessed. So am I blessed within God's keeping. So am I free from pointed stress, steadied to feel the soul replenished, given this grace, folded in peace. But we very seldom in real life find such moments of stillness in our over-busy world. So we are going to sing, and we're going to sing a song that acknowledges 4 harried people from the gospel stories. The first of them is Matthew. Matthew was a lonely man. Come, brother, stand by me. Lonely Matthew found a friend. Come, Jesus, stand by me. Another sullen money day, a rubber stamp, an empty tray. Unless we follow when you say, come, brother, stand by me. Another solid Monday, a rubber stamp. You've probably met every one of them if you've not played that role, Matthew or Martha or Peter or Thomas. And now we're going to join in a prayer which responds to that kind of very ordinary turmoil in our lives. It comes to us from the Roman Catholic Franciscan order. So let's say together as our prayer this morning, Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always. I will not fear, for you are ever with me. And you will never leave me to face my struggles alone. I hope that strikes a chord with some of us. And now, some thoughts about the couple of women who stand at the heart of the service. When Jesus reached the scatter of houses that formed the small village of Bethany, the group of disciples at once knew where he was heading. The home of Lazarus and his two sisters, Martha and Mary. They were all friends from way back. And Bethany, which is still a village just about 2 miles away from Jerusalem, was a very convenient stopover for the travelling group, hot and dusty from a long day's walking. So Jesus knocks on the door, and there is Martha, delighted to see them all. Come in, she says. Something to drink and eat? You look as though you need it. So they all crowd in, and several of them sit down wherever there's a place. How good to get off your feet. And that was when Mary came into the room, and Martha headed off to the kitchen. Now you talk to them while I go and get something ready, she says. Drink first, perhaps? Now all of that strikes me as absolutely normal. The way it always is when a friend comes calling. Just the way it is often in a New Zealand home, when in walks an old family friend to have some time with us and catch up on the news. I found it was usually my job to check what they wanted to drink, then I would retire to the kitchen, leaving my wife to get on with the conversation. And when I came back with a tray loaded, say, with 3 coffees and a plate of biscuits, how easy it was to imagine the room in the little house at Bethany, filled with talk, and Martha out there getting it all ready for a dozen or more hungry, thirsty, tired people. I wonder who remembered what happened next, long enough for it to become one of the stories told about Jesus, passed on into the communities that Rita set down every precious memory they could hold on to. Now, I reckon it was Martha. Wouldn't you remember a rebuke from a dear friend who later died? She couldn't have written it down. Village women were never taught to write in those days. But somehow, years later, perhaps 80 years later, that story reached Luke the Greek, who set it down in his orderly, tidy way as part of his record of the events that were fulfilled among us, as he said, just as they were handed on to us from those who from the beginning were the earliest witnesses and servants of the Lord. An eyewitness, a servant of the Lord. Couldn't that be an exact description of Martha? Martha, who was cumbered about much serving, and came to him and said, Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore help me. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part. That's in the older language of the King James Bible. Now, I doubt if Jesus could ever have imagined what later generations were going to make of that moment. Hungry for significance in every action and word that fell from his lips, after all, wasn't he the Son of God? They constructed the story as a lesson in correct religious behaviour. It became all so clear, especially in church communities where men were beginning to take over and assign women a subordinate role. The sisters were each given a symbolic status. They were to signify how all women were to be seen. And hadn't Jesus turned a cooperative sisterhood, a perfectly normal, you do the talking, while I get the cup of tea relationship, into a rank order of value. Value. Quiet, adoring, listening Mary. That's how women should be. Busy, overworked Martha, interrupting her sister's soul-to-soul encounter with Jesus with her plea for a hand in the kitchen. That was, at best, second best. It certainly wasn't the better part. Surely Mary belonged to the world of the spiritual. Hers was the better part. But Martha, well, she belonged to the active life, which we might want to describe as ordinary living. Hers was the undervalued part. Human life neatly divided into opposites, absolute opposites. Had Jesus said so? And that became the authorized version. Mary, well, she became the model for Christian nuns, leaving the ordinary world behind for a lifetime of devotion and contemplation. contemplation, for listening to Jesus. Martha became the model for housewives and homekeepers, preoccupied with the cares of the ordinary world. Just a cheerful, hard-working, hospitable sort of soul. Both of them were eventually awarded sainthood by medieval Christians. Mary, who's very soon got very confused with all the other Marys mentioned in the Gospel stories, has her feast day on the 25th, 22nd of July. Better get that feast day right. You might eat too early or too late. Her symbol is a pot of ointment, and so on the table I put the kind of pot of very precious ointment it would be to remind us of that. Now, she's the patron saint of repentant sinners and of the contemplatives of life. So Mary did rather well at the Lord. Martha is the patron saint of housewives and lay sisters. Her symbol is a ladle or a broom, or what I put over there, a bunch of keys that she put to locking up the various rooms. Now, if you're a fan of Martha, and I certainly am, you'll be glad to know that she sometimes turns up in paintings of a dragon, which according to a Provençal legend, she tamed once by sprinkling the ferocious beast with holy water and throwing her sash over its head. Try that sometime when you get to meet your unfriendly dragon. Her feast is on the 29th of July. But I'm going to ask you to listen to yet another version of that story, told by a modern woman. And actually, she's the first woman to be nominated for the position of Professor of Poetry at Oxford University for 315 years. So her arrival was really quite something. Her name is Hugh Fanthorpe, and she calls her poem the unauthorised version. She imagines Mary talking about her sister Martha and what Josh said to her. And just remember, by the way, that Jesus' name is actually a form of Joshua. Fanthorpe is an English poet, and so Mary talks in a very ordinary English way. And we're now going to hear that poem read by Margaret.
Of course he meant it kindly. I know that. I know Josh as well as anyone can know the Son of God. All the same, he slipped up over this one. After all, a son is only a son when you come to think about it. And this was between sisters, Marty and me. We understand each other. For instance, when Leslie died, we didn't need to spell it out between us. We just knew how to fix the scenario so Josh could do his bit. Raising Leslie, I mean, from the dead. He has his own way of doing things, has to muddle people up first, so then the miracle comes as a miracle. If he'd just walked into when Leslie was ill and said, "Okay, Leslie, you're off the sick list now," that'd have lacked impact. But all this weeping and groaning and moving of stones and praying in public and Marty saying, "I believe," etc., Then Leslie come forth, and out comes Leslie in his shroud. Well, even a half-wit could see something out of the ordinary was going on. But this was just ordinary. A lot of company, a lot of hungry men, not many helpers, and Marty had a go at me in front of Josh saying, "I'm all on my own out here. Can't you tell that sister of mine to take her finger out and lend a hand?" Well, the thing about men is they don't realise how temperamental good cooks are. And Martha's very good. Believe you me. She was just blowing her top. No harm in it, I knew that. But then Josh gives her this monumental dressing down, and really it wasn't fair. The trouble with theology is it features too much miraculous catering. Those ravens feeding Elijah, for instance, I ask you, they'd have been far more likely to eat him. And all those heaven-sent fast food takeaways, quail and manna and that, and Josh himself with the famous fish butty picnic and that miraculous draught of fishes. When poor old Marty could have done with was a miraculous draught of coffee and sandwiches instead of a ticking off. And the men weren't much help, not a thank you among them, and never a thought of help with the washing up. But don't get me wrong, of course I love Josh. Wonder, admire, believe, and he knows I do. But to give Marty such a rocket as if she was a Pharisee or that sort of type, the ones he had it in for, it wasn't right. Still, Josh himself, as I said, well, he is only the son of God, not the daughter, so how could he know? And when it comes to the truth, I'm Marty's sister. I was there. I heard what was said, and I knew what was meant. The men will write it up later from their angle, of course, but this is me, Mary, setting the record straight.
Thanks, Margaret. One of the things that comes across very powerfully for me from that poem is the natural flow of sympathy between the two women. Mary is fighting the very distinction that Luke and later Christians made so much of. These are women, sisters, united against the posturing of men, valuing each other's abilities, loving and believing in Josh, and then getting on with washing up the dishes. So if I needed to draw up a moral lesson from all of this, it would simply be that any one of us may be the one. We are all special with a new person that we are. In the eyes of God, we're no more beloved or important for our deeply spiritual nature than we are for our instinct for practical and loving service to others. And if I'm reading her correctly, the biblical Martha shows us, and Van Thorpe's Mary hints, every human is a mixture of natural piety and an equally natural practicality. There are times for every one of us when we respond deeply to the world of the Spirit. Other times when we're caught up, even overwhelmed, in the practicalities of daily living. You know, the same Martha who interrupted her sister and got a ticking off from Jesus comes fully alive in John's account of the raising of Lazarus. when she hears Jesus is coming to their house, it is she who rushes out to greet him, leaving her sister paralyzed with grief at home. And later on, Mary does the weeping, but Martha does the asking for help. Martha worries about the stink of a 4-day-old corpse. She's a realist. But it is her steady faith in the afterlife that draws forth Jesus' famous declaration, I am the resurrection and the life. And it's Martha's simple, profound response to Jesus' question, do you believe this? Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, come into the world, which still strikes us today. You see, at that moment, Martha is the one. The big surprise to us, and probably to herself. But I reckon that it was Martha who took her brother home and tidied him up and gave him a cup of tea. You see, we're all Marthas. Some of us probably are Marys as well. So pamper your spiritual side if you haven't nourished it recently, and roll up your sleeves and wash the dishes if you're too inclined to drink. Amen. Now I'm going to introduce yet another version of that story, and it's a Joy Kelly one again. And she's trying to capture the idea, I think, that every one of us, men and women, are very complex creatures, not to be separated off into Marys and Marthas, but capable of both practical, loving service and the delighted apprehension of the spiritual world of beauty. So let's hear that poem now. Thank you, Father.
She was cooking meals and setting tables, with God leaning heavily on her heart. Follow me, said God. Come, follow me. O Holy One, she answered, I am yours. Tell me how I may follow you. And God said, cook meals and set tables. What do you mean? She said. I've been doing just that for almost 9 years. I'm talking about a real vocation. And God said, for 9 years your hands have been at work, but your head has been in other places. Be present to cooking and serving meals and see what happens. With much disappointment and a little doubt, the woman tried to be present to her work. And gradually, there was a change. She began to notice the beauty of food. Every vegetable, a miracle of design and flavour. She saw the progression of life on the food chain. How plant and animal changed form, yet remained a part of the oneness. Setting a table became a sacred task.